In this video, I will cover some HTML and CSS tricks on how to make your newsletter sign up look good. Sometimes the code that the newsletter provider gives you is a little tricky, like this one here exceeds my placement. Technically the site ends here and then I have to scroll outside of the site to see the rest of the fields. This is not good. Plus you've also got some duplicate stuff that takes double the space. Here, if it tells you to type your first name, why do you tell me first name above it? So let's streamline that and let's make the submit button a little bit bigger. This particular section of embed code is located in my widget under my primary sidebar. Here above, I've got the image of my reader magnet. I can change that anytime. And then the second widget, I've got the little bit of text that's visible, and then it's my newsletter code that goes on and on and on and on and on. So I'll tell you how to go about finding the problematic spots and how to fix it in this video. So here you see the text, and then you see all of that code is just for that. In this tab here, I will make use of the Chrome built-in developer tool. It's out of my recording area, but under Chrome, there's a menu called View, and under View, there's Developer, Developer Tools. And then this adds a section. It can put it here. It can also put it to the left. I am used to this version here, and that's the one I prefer, but feel free to play with this. There's two areas. The top part shows you the HTML here if you've selected elements, and then the bottom part here shows you the CSS. And if you scroll down here, it kind of summarizes all of the various properties, the padding, border, margin, and all of that stuff. So this may be gibberish to you, but hopefully after this tutorial, you will have learned a little bit of HTML and CSS. The part you want to use is this little icon here. It tells you select an element in the page to inspect it. Okay, so I'm clicking this, and then you notice when I move, it highlights various things. Now I see this is the problematic part that takes it outside of my page. So if I click on that, it tells me it's the form. If I go here, it tells me the form is 460 by 262 pixels. So this is the thing I want to fix. Also here, if I see on the left, it tells me that this particular ID has a width of 500. It's 460 plus 20 plus 20 is 500 because padding is technically part of the width. So this is the width that I will change. And you can kind of test out your CSS here in this interface. I know the answer, but what I want to do is 100%. That way it will make it fit the entire width of the available space. And if I go responsive with that, then the entire width becomes the entire width as well. So this is the best approach when you want to make your form fit the full width. Instead of using pixels, just use percentage like that. But this is not saving it for anybody. This is just me using this browser. If I refresh my page, that change is going to be gone. So I need to make that change so that we can all see this. This is the part where it gets a little tricky, depending on if you got your code from Mailchimp, Aweber, or ActiveCampaign, whichever newsletter provider you're with. It's going to take you a little bit of time to try to find it. You can sometimes try to find Control F, and I'm going to look for 500 pixels, but it's not necessarily going to find it. But I'm just going to scroll through. And you're paying attention, you're trying to find that 500 pixels, and you know it's going to be just that, nothing else after that. So I'm trying to scrolling down. And there it is, Form 21 with 500 pixels. So I'm going to change that to be 100% and save it. Now when I refresh it here, it's now fixed. So that's one issue. Let's deal with those labels. So this here is a label. This is an input field. And what is in there right now is called a placeholder. Sometimes you will not have a placeholder. So I can close this right now. So my goal will be to remove the labels and just leave the placeholder, but I don't need to say type your. I can just say first name. People will get it. So this is not CSS, so you just have to keep scrolling down. This is where it says label first name. You're going to delete that. And then input placeholder. This is where we're going to change it to just first name. If you're with Mailchimp, Mailchimp does not do the placeholder. So you yourself, it would just be like this. And then you would just have to manually start typing placeholder WordPress would kind of fill in the rest for you. Just enter equals, and then you would do first name like that. Also, Mailchimp has a tendency to tell you there's a little div at the top that says asterisk means it's required. You can remove that entire div and then just put required in brackets, as you will see me do shortly. So last name, this is the label for that. I'm going to get rid of that label. And where it says type your last name, I'm just going to remove that and put last name. That's good enough. And now this is the one where it says this means it's mandatory. So I'm just going to say email, and in brackets I will say required. That way I can get rid of that little asterisk because I'm telling people with my placeholder. I'm going to save that. And now if I refresh, I've got this. Yay! So now let's make that button take the entire width. So here we go. My form ended here. My button is here. So the button, this is the text that is visible. If you wanted to, you could change it. You could say subscribe. Here, so this is the opening tag for the button. This is the visible text. This is the closing button. Within here, I'm just going to put my cursor, type space, and I'm going to add some CSS in line. I'm going to say style equals open quotation marks width 100%, like that. And that's going to take care of that. Save. There we go. So hopefully that explained how to simplify the form. Sometimes the input fields here will be touching each other. The same way I did that with my button, I can just look at the input. Just before it ends, I can add style equals width 100%, semicolon, margin. Now, you can put 4 numbers, and the numbers go in a specific order. They mean top, right, bottom, and left. So I'm going to say 5 pixels at the top, 0 on the right, because I want it to be 100% of the width, 5 pixels below, and 0 on the left. So I'm going to make that 25 above, but 5 below. Now you can see that I've got 25 pixels above. So this is how you would go about changing those things if you needed to. But for this particular form here, I do not need to style my input. But you could style your input for your last name, for your email, for your first name, and for whatever other input field you may have. Now let's look at an example on a landing page. I've got this landing page here. I can view it. So you can see this one has a lot of information, but once again, we have the form here with some white background. This is set up as one of my premium themes. The form is in here, using my right mouse button to open in a new tab. Using my same tool, Chrome, View, Developer, Developer Tools. I'm going to try to find the problematic thing and then fix it. This is the form once again, form number 19. And I see that the background is FFF, and I can tell you FFF means white. If I overwrite that and write transparent, ta-da, the white is gone. So here's some CSS. You can make the background transparent. So now I need to find within my form the part that said FFF and change that to be transparent. Also, while I'm in here, the width, there's some kind of padding around it. So see here, if I highlight, it shows me that there's 20 pixels, and that green matches the alignment. So if I want to match up the text with this, this is what I need to deal with. So I need to also change the padding of 20 that you see right here. If I were to make that 0, then it fits nicely. And same thing again with my button. I will need to change that button to make it bigger so people see it, or maybe subscribe would be a better term to use there. So let's change that. So going to edit my page, now I can do Control F for FFF important. And this is much easier here to find the information, but I know this is not the one. Color that means the color of the text. What I'm looking for is the one that says background. And there we are, background of white. So I'm going to change that. And I'm going to make it transparent. And they had exclamation mark important. I'm going to leave that there. That is used when you want to overwrite the CSS to do something else that is controlled elsewhere. So if it was there, I'm going to leave it there because it's obviously overwriting something else. Also, I wanted to remove my padding, make it 0. That's done. So if I save my page now, let's check that it's fine. Now my page is done saving. I'm going to refresh. And that is now fine. I still need to get rid of my labels, and I still need to make my button bigger. So scrolling past the CSS, so now I see my form. So first, label, I'm going to get rid of that. And then the placeholder is here. I'm just going to say first name. Next, label. It's always important to open and close, take it all out. Don't leave the closing tag in. And I'm also going to remove type your. And then the email, type your email. I'm just going to say email. People will know it's required, but I want to be specific because that's the only one that's going to throw an error. And then this is my button. So instead of saying submit, I'm going to say subscribe. And in here, I'm also going to say style width 100%. And I can also do something else. I can say font weight bold. I can also say text transform uppercase. But you could have easily just spelled subscribe in uppercase letters. That would have done the same thing. So if I update now this is what I have. Oh, I forgot to remove my label. Let's remove that last label that I forgot to remove. Label. Save, refresh, and here we go. Now my privacy policy is kind of touching that subscribe button. What I will do is I will add a little bit of margin below it. So this is my button here. I'm just going to say margin bottom. That is also some CSS. And I'm going to say 15 pixels. That should be plenty. Maybe it's a little bit too much. I'll reduce that. And you may want to consider removing the last name, because the more information you ask of your reader, the less likely they are to fill out the form. So normally I ask for first name and email, but you could even just ask for email address only, and that way people just feel like they've got the one field to fill out. They're more likely to submit the form. So in here, I'll just quickly go and adjust. So email, my button margin bottom, instead of 15, I'm just going to do 10. And I think we'll be good to go with that. Always save and preview your changes to make sure that you're good. And test it. Test your form. Sign up to your own list and see if you get the email message. So if I test to subscribe it now, it tells me, okay, this is required. Okay, that's good. So at least that's working. Now I'm going to subscribe. Okay, so that connected correctly. Always test your forms after you include a form anywhere. Now let's say you're on Mailchimp. If you go to your lists, this is a demo list here. I don't have anybody on this list. But if you go to sign up forms, here you could create your form. But once the form is created, you can select it within this section here, embedded forms. And you may have already done this and use that code to embed it on your site. So I will tell you how to modify this. Everybody's code will be different, but I'm just going to copy and paste this entire code snippet here. Control-C to copy. I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to open up Text Edit. If you're on a PC, you can use any kind of text editor that's as basic as they come. If you try to paste that into Word, you will encounter problems because the quotes will turn into curly quotes, and we don't want that. You don't necessarily have to do this, but if you do this step within this text editor here, your life will be much easier than if you try to do that within WordPress. So I've zoomed in here, and then I will talk you through some of the sections and what they do and why you can and cannot delete certain things. So this is just a comment. You can leave that there so that if you look at your code, you know that this was the Mailchimp code. This link, as well as all the way down here, this entire thing could be deleted. All it does is that it removes the styling in terms of CSS. So we have a background that's white. The font size is 14 pixels using Helvetica for fonts. You can keep that or delete it. I personally like to delete it, and then I style my form. But you can leave it there. That's an easy way to get rid of the styling if the styling is an issue. Now it's very important to not modify anything that says ID or action with URLs. This is all connected to your Mailchimp account. Deleting those things will break your form. Now here we have a heading 2 that says subscribe to our mailing list. I can delete that. This is just opening the heading, the text, and closing the heading. I'm deleting that. This is the section with the little asterisk. So if I look at the back end here, this is this. I like to get rid of it. It's just clutter, and I can easily put a placeholder where I say it's required. So I'm going to get rid of that. So I'm getting rid of opening div, opening the span, closing the span, the text, and then closing the div. Getting rid of all of this. Now this is a label. This label is associated with this particular ID. But I'm going to get rid of the label and put a placeholder. The placeholder would enable me to put something in the text field, but it's not real text. As soon as people start typing, the placeholder disappears. So it's my way of using instructions. So I'm going to type in placeholder like this, equals quotes, and I'm closing the same quotes that I opened. They could be single or double, doesn't matter, but they cannot be curly. So this will, and I could also say required. So this allows me to get rid of the label, span, closing the span, closing the label. Important to match. So opening label, opening span, closing span, deleting all of this. Now I've got input that's sorted with my placeholder. Now the next field is my first name. Once again, I will get rid of that label by putting a placeholder in here. Like so. I'm going to get rid of the empty line. I'm going to do the same thing with my last name. Now this is important here. Do not mess with this. This is CSS that says don't display the error code unless we need it. Don't display the success code unless we need it. And there's a bunch of stuff. You do not want to delete any of that. In an earlier section of the video, there was visible text for the button. Mailchimp does buttons differently. The button is actually this here. There's no opening and closing tag. Everything is contained within this. If you wanted to change the visible text, this is where you would change it. So if I look at my form here, the word subscribe, if you wanted to change that word, you just change the value here. Join my reader group, and that would do the trick. If you wanted to style it, you could style it in here. Space, style, equals, open quotes. I'm going to say width, 100%. CSS works by giving a property, colon, the value of that property, semicolon. And that would close it. But you can add as many properties and their values as you want. So I could also say margin, 10 pixels at the top, 0 on the right side, 5 pixels below, 0 on the left side. Semicolon to finish my property in case I want to add something else. And you could also copy this same styling. I'm going to copy this entire thing from style, opening quotes, all the way to closing quotes. I'm going to copy this, paste it on all of my input fields. So my last name, my first name, and my email address will all have the same width 100% with some kind of margin, which is a gap on the outside of that so that the fields don't touch each other. And that should be it. So now I'm just going to save this, and then I will log into the site and then show you what both these versions look like. And here I've got two widgets. In the top one, I will copy the original code from Mailchimp. So you see the difference. And then in the second widget, I will copy my modified code. Selecting all of this, Control C and Control V. Now if I preview my page, so you see the original. So that was the title I removed. I also removed that, and I removed the labels and my button. So my modified is easier to see. There's less confusion, but I can also remove some spacing there. So I can play with that some more in here. So I can get rid of my margin for the first name, last name, and email. Refresh. Okay, so the fields are closer together. Now I still have an issue with my width is bigger here than here. So I'm going to turn on developer mode to see where that CSS is coming from. So the problem is with my div, the div itself here around the input. This is the one that has 96%. So when I look here, this is the div. The div surrounds the input. So I'm just going to copy my style and I will apply that style to the div that surrounds the input. Same thing here and same thing here. Saving this. Updating it, and now my width is 100%. Now let's play a little bit with the styling of this button. I want to create more spacing around the text, so padding would be what does that. Margin is the spacing outside of the element. Padding is the spacing between the text and the border of the element. So I want to make the background black and make more padding. So I will once again access this here. My button is here, the input. So within this, I'm just going to add some padding. If I just put one value, that means that the same value will be applied on all four sides. I can also do two values, and that means that top and bottom and right and left will use the same value. So I can say 8 pixels top and bottom and 4 pixels left and right. I can do that. And I'm going to say background black. You can do this, or you could do the equivalent, this, or this is also black. I'm going to save this and refresh. Okay, so it applied my padding at the top, but not at the bottom. So I want to make sure that I do important. And I also want to do height being automatic. There we go. So now that fixed my button. So I know this is a little bit of CSS that you kind of need to know to be able to fix things. This is how I simplify that Mailchimp form that I got to simplify it like so.